For the last 68 years, you, yellow star, at bottom of tulip cup, how fragrant yesteryear's memories, how their roots hold. Now you, thin as slender stem, I listen to hollow voice tunnel through telephone, a bud pushing out of bulb's papery tunic, threads its pointy green tipped needle through darkness toward breaking light of March's strengthening rays, all the while roots dipping deeper into Earth's scarred lungs. Diagnosis pulmonary fibrosis. And I want to uproot it, transplant it, bury it outside of you, somewhere elsewhere where it cannot harm you, like a cactus in the desert, scarring outward, breath of wind far away. From our family garden, but we know what we know. You cough worsening, your movement slowing, relaxed river before the rising tension of a changing tide. The news arrives while daffodils, jaundiced in cold, dusting snow, snowdrops curving spines, weighted with dying news, purple crocuses, inverted bells, crowd churchyards tolling during Passion Week. Yet earth slowly wakes from winter's tomb to revive the weary. I kneel to pray. This is all I have. This is hope that the grave will remain distant to slow the approach of its onward march. Death's unbeating heart eventually, in its own season, takes us all, each life's prophecy fulfilled. We dine together at Easter. I tell you how, as a child, I remember prayer meetings held outside in green clover fields under open tents of summer song, those long and glorious days of revival. There is no need to speak of winter now. We will splash in seaside waters along the Cape. We will drink white wine. We will dance in long, warm rays of sun's encircling strength. Fears tucked away in ocean strong, pulling undertow. Let us rejoice now and live in these tender times in sunshine. Let memories awaken despite the chronic coughing moments of worry, pills sickening the stomach of your spirit, you tenderly dancing in death's winded wing. Shadow 7, Let Memories Awaken, from our guest, Diane Sahms' book of poetry, City of Shadow and Light. Well, good evening. My name is Charles Carr, and welcome to Philly Loves Poetry, a collaboration between the Moonstone Art Centers of Philadelphia and PhillyCab. The focus of our program is to give you the rich experience of the culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia and surrounding area. And tonight we have a local poet, Diane Sahms, who, before I would begin to read her biography, has done much to create the love of poetry in the city of Philadelphia, and we'll discuss that in more detail. But in this show, which we call Philly Loves Poetry, she's surely an appropriate guest to have. Diane is a native Philadelphian. She's the author of 6, I think there's more poetry collections. Most recently, the book I mentioned, City of Shadows and Light, which was published in 2022. And most recently, a chapbook that was published by Moonstone, Luna, the Lesser Light. Diane is published, or has been published in North American Review, Sequestrum Journal of Literature and Arts, Brushfire Literature and Arts Journal, the Northern Virginia Review, Poems for All, Valley Voices, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Chiron Review, Southern Arizona Press, among others, with her poems forthcoming from Tiny Seed Literary Journal and Arlington Literary Journal. Diane is the winner of several poetry awards, including the Partisan Press Award, and recipients of a AEV Ventures Foundation grant for poetry. Diane is a former high school English teacher. She now works full-time for government and is a poetry editor of the journal North of Oxford. So welcome, Diane, and it's really great to have you finally, here on Philly Loves Poetry. And as I said in my introduction, it's really appropriate that we have you on a show that talks about the love of poetry. And surely you and your partner have really, for many, many years, done a lot to advance the love of poetry in this city through, your original journal, which was the Fox Chase Journal, and then all the readings you had for several years, which was really phenomenal. And so before we get into discussing your book, I wanted you to talk a little about North of Oxford, and which is 2 or 3 years old, maybe less, and just give us a preview of what North of Oxford is all about.
So North of Oxford superseded the Fox Chase Review. The Fox Chase Review was in existence from 2007 to 2012. And then we started North of Oxford. It's an international online journal. We have book reviews, essays, commentary, and poetry. George Reuter, Emil Reuter, and I, we manage the magazine. He's the book review editor, and I'm the poetry editor. You can find out about North of Oxford if you'd like to submit either a book review, essay, commentary, or poems at North of Oxford WordPress. And you will, you can go to the About page there, and then you can look at the criteria for submitting whatever you would like to submit. So the book reviews appear from our staff at the first of every month, and then the poetry appears every month on the 15th of the month, the middle of the month.
Wow. That's a lot to do in addition to writing poetry and having a full-time job and being, I guess a parent as well. So my hat's off to you. And thank you very much, and George, for North of Oxford.
Actually, I think it started in 2016. I'm sorry. So we did the Fox Chase Review to 2016, and then 2016 until the present time, we've been doing North of Oxford. I think I said 2012, but it's 2016.
Okay. Well, that's great. So let's get into talking about your two books, The City of Shadow and Light, and then your second book, the Lesser Luna, the Lesser Light. And it's interesting that light and shadow plays very much and prominently in both of these wonderful books of poetry. The first book is a longer book. The second is a chapbook. And the first book, you can explain it better than I, is broken into 3 parts. But I just said when I read it and I reread it, I just had a feeling of this. It's almost like a mythology of Philadelphia. And what I think I said to myself, it's almost like a tribal chronicle of Philadelphia, because I really feel that Philadelphia is tribal in a way, and in a very unique kind of way. The neighborhoods are tribal. There are certain discussions that become very tribal that only people in Philadelphia really understand, other than, soft pretzels and cheesesteaks. There's a whole other language here. But can you discuss, what you wanted to happen in those 3, how you built? And what I really found is that you start with this Iris, this mythical figure, and then you move on to shadow and light, and you have like a symmetry there of light and shadow. And I think somewhere you mentioned about, a Jungian model there. And then we come down, we come up from the underworld into above earth, into your world of memories, and
Yes.
which is, the way it unfolds is really fascinating.
Well, thank you. And also, thank you for such a wonderful reading of my aunt's poem, Let Memories Awaken. She has since passed over. She died in 2021 from the disease, pulmonary fibrosis. And you did just a wonderful reading, and I wanted to thank you.
Okay.
Yes, so City of Shadow and Light is in 3 sections. The first section is Iris, and Iris, it's a suite, and Iris starts in domestic abuse. She starts in darkness. This poem was written in my first book, Images of Being. So when I left my marriage in 2008 and I started working on some new poetry, I didn't want to leave Iris in the darkness. So I was reading a lot of Jungian books at the time, Carl Gustav Jung, and Shadow and Light. And so Iris did start in the darkness, and that poems in memorandum. But there's 19 poems, and it's an evolutionary story of Iris, who has evolved from the dark into the light. So out of the poems, actually there's 16, a total of 16 poems. She has an evolutionary process, and it's realistic. And Iris is goddess of the rainbow. She's a woman's name. She's a flower, and she's also the color of the eye that's responsible for letting the light into your eye. So it was a really good metaphor for me to use. It's very feminine, it's very womanly, it's very empowering. So I would not leave her in the darkness. And she has grown through the poems, each individual poem, into the light. And she ends in a spiritual place. The last poem is entitled Iris's Vision, and she does end in the light, in a spiritual place. So it's just an evolutionary part of a poem, a suite for Iris. And then Shadow and Light is 20 poems, and they're dichotomies. I sent them up to be a shadow one and a light one, and then a shadow two all the way through. So there's 20 poems in pairs. So there's 10 pairs. What I did here is I took character poetry, nature poetry. Sometimes they weave in and out of each other. Sometimes they stand alone. They're narratives primarily, and they're about people from Philadelphia. It's a Philadelphia book, City of Shadow and Light, Philadelphia. So each one is the opposite. So for instance, the first one is When Owl's Hooded Eyelids Open, and that's a dark poem. It's a shadow poem. And then there's kind of a response or the opposite, which is Directional Flow, and that's a light poem. So I offset all of these themes, all these titles with dark and with light. And the idea is that if you have extreme dark, it's not good. And if you have extreme light, it's not good. So what we're aiming for, and what Carl Jung talks a lot about, is that you need the balance. Also, Joseph Campbell would always say in many books of his that I read, leaning toward the light. And they use a lot of archetypes. So there is a lot of mythology. There is mention of archetypes. And then the last section, section 3, Sing Me Ruby Red, is an adult me. There are a lot of memory poems that I hadn't told in my prior books. I had 5 books, and every once in a while I'll weave in a childhood poem. But I wanted to do more than that. So I am looking back as an adult, and there's 16 poems. And they too are all about me, my family, or characters that I knew when I grew up, a coming of age type poems in that particular section.
Yeah, there's surely also an amplification of this thing that I call, this culture, this tribal culture, the things that you talk about in your childhood. And I understand and I can relate to that, to these things, which is very interesting. But it's how you've built layer upon layer to get to this point. But looking back from that point, how do you see Iris, this person that you actually call the seer, lives above the withered world where unwakened lives live, not the world where Iris now resides. And now, how did you want that to kind of relate back to Iris?
Yeah, so Iris, as I had said, there's this evolution. So she starts in the dark. Then she reads poetry in a poem. Iris reads poetry into the void. So she's writing and reading her poetry, but she reads at a reading where no one is there. And there's a lot of images about Yosemite. She's in the dark, no one is listening. And it's very, there's a lot of biblical references there. Then Iris's mind is eclipsed. Here I use the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse. So it's memories of darkness. Then there's one about a loved one. Then she dreams. I have these dreams. So Iris dreams of a cage, but it's not her life, it's someone else's life. And I make reference to a wedding cake and Mendelssohn's March. So I'm bringing in a lot. She contemplates death. So I have her understanding umbra, which is the dark. And then there's the hope. There's the turn. And Iris spies fireflies. So she's grown out of the dark. Of course, can be a flower here, and she's spying fireflies. And it's hopeful, but they're forgotten gods too. They're lanterns of ancient languages. There's 2,000 known species together with moonlight. Uh, they're just a foreign music. So there's a lot of references to different archetypes. She feels the wave. She experiences love of others and love of herself. She's liberated. There's this long poem where she becomes liberated, where she's talking to her husband and he's sleeping and he doesn't hear a word she says. She does this whole march to freedom, to liberation. And then at the end, she's the tail of the comet. The tail of the comet doesn't face the sun, but the coma always faces the sun. And she's kind of in a coma with him.
Mhm.
And then she becomes a single mother, and there's her musings as a single mother. She hates corporate greed because she's a woman and she's experiencing injustices in the workplace. So I'm going through, she crosses over, she buries her super ego, she goes underground. And I think that's the one that you may have been referring to, or the rebirth. When you go underground, you go inside of yourself, and then she comes
Mhm.
out of herself. And she just continues on until she finally ends inside a church, actually, and in a spiritual place. So it's an evolution of a soul from darkness to light. And I use the flower images and different archetypes to drive it, to push it forward.
Yeah, very successful. Diane, what background? So as you approach this as a poetry project, we'll call it, what influences and informs your poetry, or maybe informs you in the creation of this book of poems?
Well, I have always written character poetry, childhood poetry, nature poetry, dream poetry, um, love poetry. And I think what I did in this book was I was writing a lot of character poetry, which leads me to the second part of the book, City of Shadow and Light. And in this part of the book, there's a lot of character poetry and there's a lot of nature poetry. And what influences my work probably mostly is a lot of my readings. I read a lot of Carl Jung. I read a lot of Joseph Campbell. I read Eckhart Tolle. Who else do I read? I read a lot of poets too. I read Giannis Rizzo and Chinese poets, and I think they just all filter into my art. I also like mythology a lot, and uh, Joseph Campbell's responsible for that. I read a lot of his books. He has one called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So if you notice, I'll give you an example. In Banshee of Broken, my Shadow 3 poem, a banshee, when you hear a banshee in Irish mythology and folklore, it's alerting you if you hear that someone's going to die. So my aunt died, my other aunt Carol, and she said that she was brokenhearted when she died. And I was with her the Thursday before she died. I think she died the next day, and I had visited her the night before, and she told me she was broken, and it really upset me. And she had all this apparatus on her face, and a tear came down over her face, and it was just daunting and haunting. So I used the banshee. That's the name of the poem. It was the call of death, which is darkness, and this is a shadow poem. And I have that her heart is broken in the poem. And at the end, the last part of the poem is a creenet. And a creenet is what you sing when people die. It's a lamentation. And so I do a whole lamentation, a dirge-like, repetitious type uh, poem, end of the poem. It's in parts. It's in 4 parts, and that ends it. And it's kind of in keeping with the tradition. And then the light poem that accompanies that one is called Harbinger, as yellow shafted flicker. So I was in the dark with the banshee and the creenet, the dirge, the lamentation, and I go to an ornate feathered dressed bird, which is a beautiful bird if you've ever seen a yellow shafted flicker. And it's an ornate feathered dressed a shaman, alone with a spiritual message in a language only wind can translate, transported here, my small urban garden for a brief moment of breath. So I liken the flicker to a shaman because, as you know, shamans go to the world of the dead and they bring back healing to help to heal those who are sick or those who need hope with instructions. So this bird appeared in my backyard after my aunt had died. And it's the only time I've ever seen a yellow shafted flicker in my backyard. I took one picture and never seen it again. And it's a beautiful bird. It has, and I describe it in the poem, its beautiful characteristics, its peachy brown face, its intricate patterning. And I also, its underparts, I say, are buff and white, spotted with numerous black pupil polka dots as nazars to ward off the evil eye. So if you know what a nazar looks like, it's that black with the white and the blue, and it wards off negative energies. So the yellow shafted flicker is my good luck charm. He's a prelude of beneficial news, wholesome healing powers, optimistic underwing cape fanning out into departure's rapture. So I use the bird as a shaman, his parts as Nazars to ward off the evil eye, because I needed the good, the light, after all the darkness with the banshee and my aunt Diane of a broken heart.
So, yeah, and I hope you read the last poem in the book. I mean, when you're doing your reading, I thought that was really wonderful. I mean, we have about maybe 5 minutes before we go to, your reading. I wanted to get Luna, the Lesser Light. What was fascinating about Luna, the Lesser Light is number one, how you moved away to this, these Japanese forms,
Mm.
jumping from your book and something we haven't discussed is when I first read your book, I said, man, Diane really does. She's not afraid. She really lays it on. She takes very big, thick strokes with her images and everything, and she's not afraid to do that. And because there's a lot of people that want to edit you down, and everything. But I mean, your poetry is. I mean, I hope people could tell it from my reading, is very driven. There's a real drive and real energy in these poems.
Thank you.
And we come to Luna, the Lesser Light, and I'm not saying it's not there, but here we have a very fine form or different forms that you have. But the start of it with the faces of the moon, which is very much an image and a central part of indigenous cultures, American indigenous cultures,
Yes.
and how you've taken that and you're fusing that with this Eastern form, I find very fascinating. I mean, why did you choose to do that?
So I started writing moon poems in 2019, and when I first started writing moon poems, I was just writing a whole bunch of poems, and I was trying to put them into a form because some of the ones I was writing were very short, some were very long, and I had no grouping or any way of trying to form follows function. And I couldn't find a form. I had plenty to say about Luna, the Lesser Light. She's a feminine object, a symbol for me, but I could not format them. So we received a book in the mail from Copper Canyon. It's The Trees Witness Everything by Victoria Chang. And it was written in a very odd patterning. And I at first I wasn't sure about it. And then I really liked the patterning. And then when I read in the back, she had used Japanese forms, and she used them throughout her whole book. And I said to George, I'm like, maybe this is the form that I can put Luna in, because I want to put her in a form because she's rotating. She's in a tidal lock around planet Earth. She's in a form she can't break free ever. Therefore, it would be nice to have a specific form. And I like the idea of the hybrid of the Japanese form, the Eastern form with my work and with Luna, the Lesser Light. So that's when I came across these wonderful, there's 5 forms, and they're all syllabic. And so I was able to put my poems, all of Luna, the Lesser Light, Timeless, the Faces of Night, all but I think the last 3 are in Japanese form. The last 3 are in free verse. But the second part, Timeless Traveler, is all in Japanese form.
Yeah,
And I needed that. I needed something to put her in. And also when you do Japanese form, just the nature of the syllabic form itself, you have to peel away a whole lot of words.
yeah.
And as you know, in City of Shadow and Light, I'm very free, and I do a lot of modifiers, as you said, and I use a lot of metaphor. And for me to have to take this image of the moon and to peel down each of the poems was quite the challenge.
Yeah, and I think you've really succeeded. And that's what's so fascinating when you put these books together.
Thank you.
Really, it's as a duo. For people who want to take a crack at poetry, you're getting 2 very different approaches to poetry, and I think that's really very very fascinating. So
Thank you.
we're at that magical time
Oh,
in the show where, well, it's great to have discussion about poetry, and we could continue for probably another hour, Diane. And I appreciate your responses and your discussion. But now we would really like to listen to your poems.
well, thank you. So I will be reading from both City of Shadow and Light and Luna, the Lesser Light. I'm going to start with my reading with Luna, the Lesser Light. And I'm going to read from the 12 Faces of Night. This is December's moon poem. It's also known as the Cold Moon. As I don't know, you did mention I use the indigenous names of the moon throughout this portion. So this is the Cold Moon, December. So Cold Moon speaks. I am the silent stabilizer. Don't underestimate my power. Without the strength of my spinning boulder, planet Earth would go crashing into the sun. My tidal lock is the main switch of the tides, keeps planet Earth from flooding with even more devastation than Noah's time. The mainstay of my hub and I turn like a clock's well-greased gears around the bright blue living planet. Through my monocle perception, I am omnipresent. Even when out of sun's spotlight, I thrive in shadows of night, unafraid. And now I'll read from the Timeless Traveler part of my chapbook. This is 5 Cataltas, Moon Songs. 1. I stand on the edge of nightfall. We merge as two entities, one quietude. 2. If I beam up to have tea with you, where is your favorite crater to hide? 3. Wish I could waken pillowed head from orbit, cast away dreams in this darkness. 4. We are lonely. We are travelers. Where are we going? Only in circles. 5. Maybe in truth's last moments, you will hear my voice and know it to be my own. There are 3 different Japanese forms that I use for my next poem, entitled New Moons. 1. Dead light, absent sun, wearing an impervious blackish satin veil inside midnight's crypt where sun or light cannot shine on you, to touch you, penetrate through. 2. Opal on night's floor, unseen in dark hidden depths, a mysterious sorceress painting words like spells to imbue human minds. 3. Catalta, invisible to the naked eye as a pile of cremains scattered around. This is a choka. I haven't described the syllabic patterning, but it is in the preface of my book, the different syllabic forms. So this is called Sometimes. Sometimes a withered heart spun round with no need to beat. Sometimes a seed from which nothing grows. Sometimes an orbed tomb holding all legendary voices of ages edged round. Sometimes a trawler's dragging nets collecting burnout stars. Sometimes a steering wheel for minds gone mad. Nietzsche's last 11 years, Van Gogh's final 18 months. Moonquake is also a choka. If I were a mole tunneling up to the moon, star nose lighting way, crawling through umbilical cord connecting me to dead field of you, and as I push open an encrusted latch of a hatch, a moonquake occurs, and mineral fragrances lift glitter, and I love Luna, the lesser light. In returning to self-same sleep, I lower down into a ladder of dreams. And now I'd like to read from City of Shadow and Light, Philadelphia. Oops. Sorry. So I'm going to start with The Suite for Iris. And this is a poem about the death of a loved one. In fact, you read about my Aunt Peggy who died, and this is my Aunt Carol, the same one that I wrote the Banshee poem for. It's entitled, Iris Observes a Sparrow at the Apex and Remembers. Today, cold December sun streamingly rushes, bright, radiant light downpours the stone wall, where a sparrow clings in the mist, and Iris wonders what it is holding on to. A flat wall? No, not entirely. There is a high raised relief, an embossed concrete line, which it clings to in morning light, much like a Messenian stele, marking the borderline between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Dark cloud eyes flashed thunder, and lightning must have struck open her chest because a sparrow was pecking through the bloodworms of death. Humble print of the Pieta hung, and from Madonna's eyes tear-shaped garnets fell like a broken string of pearls, spreading hopelessness all over the Carrara marble corridor. Overstretched leather covering of her heart drummed out a faint death beat march, not shaking of a rattler's tail, but a dull, weakening beat. The line on the monitor screen flattening, and there was nothing for Iris to hold on to. One large, lethal tear slid dangerously down, rode over the high horseshoe cliff of her chin, the way a black and white movie once shown a man inside a barrel riding over Niagara's rushing white waters, shattering into the sudsy, foaming jaws of splintering death. The shivering sparrow pressed against stone, gone. So Iris ends in light, but only after she buries her superego. All right, this is called Iris Buries Red Balloon Under Autumn's Dogwood. Iris's last memories of inflated self as red balloon with slow shrinking leak happened, occurring ever so slowly over this historical summer, the way sun's blazing flame gradually dies down and numerous leaves like confetti sough, vibrant colors fall, tumble from home felt branches to blanket cooling earth. Winds yanking undertow as Hemingway's The 3-Day Blows come now and rip all the leaves of the trees. The wind blew it out of her head. So it goes. This early November morning, after 58 years, Iris's grave thoughts open to the notion of Earth's coffin of chill. As seer sees the red balloon dead beneath naked sword branches of dashing dogwood, humbly she scoops it up inside self, soothes and kisses it forgivingly, then buries it in a boot box as it rots lovingly in spinning time. Headless body of a cloud floats knowingly by above this weathered world where unawakened lives live, not the world where Iris now resides. So Iris ends in the light. This is Iris's vision. Venus low in East Baroque sanctuary dazzles artistry. Here, by some own unknown magnetism, a fish in a swift flowing hypnotism. Sacred electrical space, circular gemstone rope drapes wrists, Ave Maria's loveliness, dove releasing eyes stream holiness, and Iris weeps as tears silently slide caterpillars down into the throat of the messenger, into rhyme zones, inner roots as heart's arteries, into soul's stain, arrows of flame inside crowned vision. Oh, music wild, oh, to laugh, oh, to cry, oh, to sing and dance to dance. Who am I? Wrecked, wretched creature under this ageless, timeless humbleness, shadow lost in divine depths where there's forgiveness, where light temporarily fills all emptiness. Now I'll be reading from section 2, Shadow and Light. And as I said before, there's 20 poems, 10 shadow and 10 light poems. And I would like to read a light poem. It's called Directional Flow. And this poem is a poem inspired by the book of Ruth and the story of Naomi. Directional Flow. Sycamore in moonlight. Just after torn and scattered sunset, smoky clouds billow around and over pieces of January's protective moon, lacing through sycamore dreams. Still tied to and hanging from thinnest threads, brown seed balls dangle like the leftover spirit of Christmas swinging canopy. And I am Bethlehem, arriving, believing. Naked limbs, resilient trunk silhouette have awakened connective, natural pattern within. Yet, from another angle, snow lingers as I wrestle cold and bitterness, dead days of loss, loitering memories. I am Jacob. Sycamore at master bedroom window. We watched each other dress and undress since I moved here decades ago in a different season's climate. Sycamore in summer, emeralds, 1986, welcoming limbs spread, fanning hands, applause. I, 2-year newlywed, was dressed in new home hope, 6-month-old son in tow. After 22 long and desolate winters, 2 more children, divorced. Then a dozen more years of time's pebbles rippling through tidal pools of ever-changing presence. Sycamore's guiding spirit still there, older, wiser, dressed in peace after witness to horrific storms. Sycamore speaks. When I branched over into silence, when snow-laden patience burned fiery spirit within, when soldering iron pens, wood-burning tip transferred image, when I allowed deep-spirited roots to hold, when shafted ends reached praise, when newly formed humility shed the old bark of self, Sycamore became audible. Some deserve the drought God brings, the against winds blowing. Arrow twig weather vane pointed toward Bethlehem and Moab, straight into Naomi's heartwood, Ruth's story. Journey toward muscular labor of famished fields, devastated mother's despair, toward muted faith. Clouds, brave strength of silver cloud chords slide me under harmony, not questioning reason of antiquated ages or directional flow. Famine, though my sons died, not physical deaths from fields of famine, their living disappearance is none other than death to me. Tinsel, starlight, silent promise, I lift my eyes to see. Another window. From behind heart's window, eyes paint morning. Cloud-filled essence spilling as I realize everything holds its own dimension in time and space, like this daybreak, where I cannot decide if shades of blue are behind or around or in front of sycamore. Upper canopy ever so slightly swaying as skies peaking blues keep changing intensity of hues. Crowned wisdom of loved creator to trust God as Naomi trusted toward Naomi. Age spirit, wanderer, wholeheartedly gazing into fragile pain's reflections. Hear sycamore's winter song silently singing beyond all senses. See into depths of being. Age spirit, wandering barley and wheat fields, thrashing, unspooling thoughts toward inner furrows, share in hearts bound breaking, step inside fields and passageways as God himself takes many shapeshifter forms. Resident death within constraints of familial recovery, such unhealable and incurable sufferings for those spiritually lost while still alive. By mercy, by grace, bring golden wheat harvest. That was a poem from My Estranged Sons. And now a light poem, number 4. How beautiful you are is for my daughter Mary. How beautiful you are, daughter, swaying among Badlia and climbing Clementis, and one might think you are walking anywhere wearing reversible blue, white, overblouse, gauzy, lightweight, loosely draped, moving ahead with easeful purpose, world around you, illusionary, transitory, somehow knowing in life's unknowingness, we are merely temporary beings, briefly felt freedom, and field of brilliance as energy abounds, your beauty astounding, spirit source sensation, immensity of being, truest essence, pure dancing flame, as silvery blue butterfly, decorative wings, fringed in flare, presence shines through paper lantern skin, glowing in this, your flight between flights. So I'll end this book with poems from the 3rd section, Sing Me Ruby Red. And while growing up on Ripka Street, I lived in 398 Ripka, and my grandparents lived at 392. So we were in the bookends of row homes. So it was quite easy to visit them, and they were much a part of my growing life. So while growing up, my aunts and my mother and grandmother would all sit on the front porch listening to the Phillies radio station. And this is a poem called Thorn and Roses, a baseball poem. Rosebush being there, all my growing, thorns and roses life, as each ancestor passed by it, where all of us as children played, built snow mountain beside it, and summer's blooms listened, when all elders alive then sat on the porch tuned into the Phillies radio station. Announcer calling each swing and a miss, each pitch runs batted in, as if ancestral wisdom passed down in 9 innings, balls and bats, diamonds and dugouts, jeers and cheers, wins and losses, safe and out. So many lives pass by, and in passing on to another place, each hearse driven coffins, last drive by, home plate, and rose garden, before their bodies' final disappearance into sacred. Now, the very last relative and house retired. So today, after reshaping thorns and roses for winter like a groundskeeper, I clean up clippings, hand ruby love to her from my glove, and take one home with me. Place thorn cut stem and last full bloom into Philly's beer glass of tap water on kitchen's windowsill, elbows deep in snowy mound of soapy suds, look into Rose's anonymous pupil surrounded by petals of ruby slippers tapping together touch, whispering each ancestor's faded name, home and safe.
So we have time for, another poem. If you want to
Oh,
read
okay.
some more, we have
Okay.
time.
We
And
have time?
I love all baseball poems. I love baseball poems. I love baseball, but especially I've loved that poem. It was really great.
Oh, thank you. So here's another one from Sing Me Ruby Red, and this is about the stepping stones, and it's about growing up near the Wissahickon Creek. Stepping stones across Wissameckam, the Napi for Catfish Stream, known to locals as Wissahickon Creek. Muddy brown churning, pulsations as vibrations through physical and mental instrument of body, until liquid cascade falls like crystal hair unclinging over rounded edge as faux bridal lace into bedded web of stones, beckons one to cross over. First, elementary school age children whose feet had to grow into stepping stones, learning curve, landing knee deep in sinking silt, wearing yellow laced bobos. All play and innocence, fun for fun's sake, careless and free, no thoughts for boys in that kind of way. Then middle school's virgin white Converse, Chuck Tallers, and mom's loose muffler voice rattling off obscure rules about boys. One, before trusting, plant one foot firmly, move forward slowly. Two, watch risky rock and rollers. Three, don't trust slime covered enchanters. Four, avoid all tricksters. And five, avoid schist glitter types, flashy fake diamonds. Unstoppable high school scarlet lettered Adidas unlaced. All rules forgotten. Bodies moving faster than shapeshifter falls flowing into devil's den. whirlpool friends, water snakes circling beneath narrow caves, swimming at one's own risk into unexplored zones, coupling, tied together, later flung dangling over telephone wires.
Wow, that's wonderful for me because growing up in Germantown, I spent a lot of my childhood life and youth in the Wissahickon. I
So
mean,
you
wandering.
remember the stepping stones at the
Oh,
bottom of the water.
absolutely. And I remember falling in completely with my sister, being soaking wet and figuring
Yes.
out how the heck are we going to walk up Rittenhouse Street to Pulaski Avenue like this.
Oh, wet.
So we sat for a while in the sun. But anyway, thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're
Uh,
welcome.
Diane, it was really wonderful. I'm glad we could cover it all, and your reading was really wonderful.
Oh, thank
And
you.
and I want to thank, of course, Ileana for always making this happen for Philly Cam. We could never really do this without, and the dependability of our technical staff here at Philly Cam to make these virtual readings possible. So, what's next on the horizon for you, Diane? Is there another book?
Actually, I'm working on two books at one time. I often do that. I often have a compilation. So I'm working on a book about Philly again called Blues, Prayers, and Pagan Chants. So that'll be my eighth book. And I'm also working on a book called Double Song, which is a lot of experimental writing now. Um, Talking to myself in the mirror, reflective poems, and very surreal type poetry that I'm starting to write in that book.
Good. Well, you keep us apprised, when they're going to be come out for publication, and we can revisit having you back on Philly
Oh,
Loves
thank
again.
you. That would be
And
wonderful.
looking forward to your readings that you're having north of Oxford, up there in Northeast Library. That's really great. I've been up there. I read up there. It's a great venue. I'd say to people, go out. It's a great venue to see. It's easy. There's parking. There's a couple restaurants around if you want to get something to eat. It's really wonderful. So I want to thank you. And I would, in of course, I always say this in leaving, is that we couldn't do any of this without Moonstone Arts. We couldn't
Absolutely.
do any of this without, the strong commitment of Larry Robin over the
Yes.
years for making poetry accessible to people in Philadelphia. He's truly, and I keep saying this, he's a cultural treasure of this city,
He
and
absolutely is.
I wish people would recognize that. So we need your support. For example, the Luna the Lesser Light just came out,
Yes.
published by Moonstone,
I'm
and
very grateful to Larry.
yeah, and there's other, chapbooks. He's churning out that. He's churning out uh, anthologies, topical anthologies on
Yes, he
things. He
is.
just did one on Labor Day. I mean, it's amazing what he does. So I ask those who love poetry, those who are interested in keeping poetry alive in Philadelphia, this is something to really support. So you can go to our Moonstone Arts Center.com and you can find a way to give us support. Continue this effort of all the things he does, not only the publications, but the readings. He has 100 readings a year. So it's incredible. And
He's a
Diane has been
true
part of those
treasure.
readings.
Larry Robin is a true treasure to
Absolutely.
Philadelphia.
Absolutely. So thank you, everyone. This has been really
Thank you.
wonderful. And I look forward to seeing everybody next month again on Philly Loves Poetry.
Thank you, Charles.